So to open the show, we had a quick look over on NASA's website, and then we were comparing some of their images that they were posting on the Google site, and we were comparing those images of the moon to JW Astronomy's YouTube channel, where he has that telescope that takes great images of the moon. And then we were comparing those to some other images that we found from NASA over on Google's image library. And what a difference! I mean, there's craters there from NASA's images that do not even exist. They've been added. And we're not talking little craters, we're talking craters that could be 500 miles wide.
What we're looking at is the difference between the images. If you take this crater right here and you compare it, we'll just zoom this in a little bit here to that crater. And I mean, NASA picture, when you zoom it in, is quite blurry. The craters are there, but the detail is not. When you start looking at these craters here, they hardly show up. These ones are almost gone. You can see them quite clearly here. One of the things we're looking at this for is the fact that people don't think anything about lunar dust. And if you look at, you can see they're showing radial striations, like off a big crater like that, the radial striations like that. The only thing that can make those disappear, of course, is the lunar dust that's happening. And if you take a look at the older craters in here, like you come into an area here and you see it's almost gone. It's being filled right in. The older they are, right? There's no radial striations on these craters whatsoever when you're looking at them here from an independent telescope. And then you see all the mountain details and stuff. None of that's apparent in any of these photographs. Completely gone. They've whitewashed this out. I don't know what kind of an overlay they're using to create that effect. The only thing I found while I was looking at it is we've got some Nazca lines in here. There's a definite triangle there. And they also show up somewhat here a bit. That's the same thing, but not as prominent. But why are they in here? What is NASA trying to create? Like this line is here and there, but the rest of them are gone. Right? Are they trying to claim alien stuff, like with all the latest stuff from, Michio Kaku and all of that stuff?
Now, what about that crater that was up on the top in the other one, right? We were looking at some other ones though, and there was craters that were not in this one and they were added.
What we're looking at, these two craters here, are these two craters right here.
In the left-hand picture, you've got a crater in the top center.
This big
Okay.
guy here is
Yeah.
not in the view here, right?
Okay.
It's off in the side. The slight angle here, this is, if you follow this line all the way up, coming up here like this, where the hell are these craters?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right.
Nothing there. Just follow that angle. Just this angle is just slightly different than this angle. It's pretty close though. But follow it up past these two craters. Where the hell is all of this? It's none of it's there. There's no detail. You get up to here, there's no detail at all based on what you see here. And when you come down here, when they're showing photographs and they're lighting them up and then they're claiming, oh, they're being lit, oh, there's volcanic activity, they're being lit up, they're bright, they're making them bright because they're not. You see that in all of their photographs. You take these back and look at that, and now you're looking at these images here. You see they threw a crater in here just for fun. It's right there. But this is from the JW website, who does independent pictures of the moon. His equipment is better than NASA's by a long shot. Where the hell is all that?
And some of the missing craters due to the difference in resolution between the telescopes.
Well, why wouldn't NASA have a higher resolution than a private individual?
I'd have to see which telescope was which, what they were using in both scenarios.
Well, I've seen better in this out of a telescope in a backyard. These other images in here that are coming from NASA, this is the same image as the other one taken off from there. And then, of course, they use all kinds of different filters that they put on it because they like to make all of these things super, super bright for whatever reason. And they wash everything out, so there's no detail at all. This particular image, you don't even see the craters up in here. that we were just looking at.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I came across this just for fun. It says the photo position is 50 meters from the sun.
Oh dear.
I thought I'd just throw that in. People can argue about it, saying these cue cards are just halfway in between. Well, look, it's all laid out. All the details are. But it's 50 meters from the sun. And here's the Death Star.
That's the one Lucas took the Death Star from.
It's nice that they have these photos that they'd like to throw in. That's a really nice, clear picture.
The Death Star moon is around Saturn.
How the hell did they get the resolution for this when they can't get a resolution of the moon?
Well, that one is actually supposed to be that's taken by the Voyager spacecraft as it approached a few thousand kilometers away from it as it's flying past.
I think that's Mimas.
Yeah, Venus, I think that's how it's pronounced, yes.
And of course, I've grabbed a few other of the things. Here's another example of craters that are being filled in by dust.
Okay, well, that goes back to that one fella that's claiming in the comments section, he says that you can't have dust in a vacuum. Okay, well, how about all of the dust that's being photoelectrically levitated, and then
Yeah.
as soon as the sun goes down, it falls back to the lunar surface? We have images of dust around the moon that's up there more than 2 miles high.
Yeah, they claim 2 kilometers up.
I may add something. If he's going to be claiming that there's no dust in a vacuum, have you ever heard of the interstellar medium? We got telescopic images and spectrogram detections of all this dust that's in the interstellar medium.
I commented back to the guy and I said, well, that's why there's no stars in the sky in the photographs from the moon, because stars are nothing more than particles of dust in the vast universe. So there can be no moon. We can't look at a moon. That's just a big particle of dust. It's a collaboration of dust, but it's a big particle of dust. So it's in a vacuum, so it can't exist. That's what the guy says. There's no dust in a vacuum. Anyway, the 2 points I was going to make on this one, of course, is you can see how the dust is filling in the different craters over time. And people are saying that, why are they always round? Well, there's a glancing blow from an impact right there in that particular photograph. This is from JW. This is another shot of that from a different angle on it. You can see that there is an effect from solar winds and everything else. And from when it levitates up and down, it makes everything very, very smooth. Some of the calculations on how much dust builds up is even more than what I had stated. They have a recent update on it. And the other thing we could make a comment on is this photograph laying 250 degrees temperature.
Remember, that's not a Polaroid.
But it's in a plastic bag.
Looks like there's air in the bag, doesn't there?
You have any comments on that one, Jared? What do you think would happen if you put a plastic bag onto the lunar surface that's been heated by the sun? Because there's no convection here. We're talking about radiation and conduction. What do you think would happen to that bag?
I imagine it would probably get, at the very least, it would probably get kind of sticky.
Yeah, well, you can actually see where it dropped down. They dropped it on its side and then it fell over. You can see the line where it hit the dirt. Can't call that regolith. This is dirt. If you see down here, the bag is not flat. Of course, it's curling up everywhere. It's starting to curl right there. It's just an old photograph that he wanted to throw away.
Do you reckon that they'll claim the curling up is due to the heat on the moon?
I would think that the plastic would be very soft and it would just flatten right down to the surface with the heat.
I know some people have been arguing, oh, why isn't this thing going up in flames? Well, there is no air in the moon, on the moon atmosphere, and so we wouldn't expect it to go up in flames. But still, I think the integrity of the plastic would be at severe risk.
Well, yeah, you'd think that almost with the temperature would bond together if they were under that much temperature. So obviously what we're looking at is not under that much temperature. Appears to be air inside the bag. That wouldn't possibly happen because if there was any residual air in there, it would just puff right out just before it exploded. These other photographs, I just picked them up. These are some from NASA, right, where they're obviously enhancing the light around here. You know, there's another one that's absolutely brilliant. It looks like they have been doing some editing to these pictures before they put them up because I don't think any of them have any real value as far as documenting anything about the lunar surface.
I was just going to say, I remember one of the astronauts, I think it was Cernan or or young, I can't remember which. They mentioned something to the extent of for every rock they encountered, they need to take like 5 or 6 photographs. Oh dear.
One of the first ones you put up showed 3 different types of craters. The point I was going to make was that there are 3 types of craters. There's impact craters, which are the little bowl-shaped craters, and there are craters which have walls on the side, on the right, and there are craters like the bottom left or the center crater, which have flat bottoms. Why should that be if they are all impact craters? An impact crater is like meteor crater. It's a
Yeah.
bowl shaped.
I think half the, like some of these, you see how much they're actually filled in with dust. That's why they got flat bottoms.
The fact that there'll be secondary craters over time, which will probably erode away some of the crater. And plus, you've also got the dust levitating, as we've discussed before. So, I don't know, over millions of years, there might be some craters that have been filled up to the dust by some extent. That would be my explanation for why the craters are so different in some cases.
Well, they get a flux in them when they impact in the center. There's a rise in the center there. Maybe that's left over from the material that actually impacted.
I'll give you a tip on how you actually date craters on the moon. When a crater is relatively young, like a few millions of years young, right, it
Yeah.
tends to have like some white radial streaks spreading out along the sides, and we see very little craters inside, and so we think, okay, that's a young crater. But when we find one that has very little radial streaking left and quite an abundance of secondary craters inside the basin, then we can say, okay, this one's much older than the other one. Few billion years old, like 2 billion or 3 billion years old, whereas the ones with more radial streaking and less secondary craters would be a few million years or maybe a billion years. So, judging by these craters here, I don't see any radial streaking around them. Impact craters in there, as I would have expected for an older crater, but this could be to do with the resolution, or it could be dust filling the craters from all the levitation, as we discussed.
This is an
So,
older section of the moon where there's less activity. And of course, the only thing that can cause it, there's no compression of the soil of any kind because there's no ice or snow or wind or rain or anything like that. And it's in 1/6 gravity, so this dust is not going to be compressed very much. As a matter of fact, the entire moon, even the gravitational force of the moon pulling in, the surface itself will not have the same type of compression that the Earth does. It's going to be a lot less dense. I mean, the rocks are there and stuff, but they weigh less because of the lack of gravity. So there won't be the same compression on the surface. So if something hits it, it's going to maybe react a little different than what the Earth does. Most of the craters you see only have a certain depth. It doesn't matter how wide they are, how big they are. And when you take a look at Meteor Crater, right, it's a mile wide and it's what, 650 feet deep, kind of thing. They kind of take that and say, okay, this is how much force is impacting, how much it can push over a mile wide. What we're looking at here are many miles wide and they're not that deep.
these are telescope images, right?
Yes.
Get out here, because these are telescope pictures. Anybody can use a telescope to take pictures of the moon.
Well, here, I'll tell you something. Here's another guy that I used to follow. This guy's called Matt's Astronomy, and he's got the same type of telescope that JW Astronomy has. Oh my God, you should see these images. So why are NASA's images like this? Why are there craters missing and there's obfuscations and things like this? And that's not the only picture. Don't worry, I've got the whole folder full of them here.
Okay, Marcus, you wanted to say something about 3 different kinds of.
Yes, 3 different kinds of craters. The top right crater, that crater has got a central peak in it. It's quite
Yeah.
small, but it's visible, and it's got serrated edges. Well, it looks like serrated edges. And then if you go to the left of that crater, that's got a flat surface. There's no central peak. It's almost as if it's been filled in. And then above it, that's an impact crater because it's the shape that you'd expect from an impact crater, same as meteor crater.
This has one inside the other.
That's right. You've got 2 impact craters inside a poorly defined other crater,
It does have the ridges around the outside as well, and it's filled in.
which I think is where the idea, the explanation for that, according to the official explanation, is that the lunar surface was molten originally, and all these craters were created after that molten phase of the lunar surface. So it all got filled in by molten material coming up from underneath, which is the explanation that's given for craters which are quite wide but relatively shallow, which doesn't appear to add up. It doesn't make any sense that that would be the case, because the explanation for the central peaks is that if you get an impact on a liquid surface, the central peaks will be created by the bounce back of the liquid surface. Like when you drop something into a bowl of water, you get a bounce of a liquid coming up. But one explanation that I've never seen offered for the lunar craters, and also the craters on other planets as well, which have a similar appearance, is that they're electrical discharge craters. When you get a very powerful bolt of electricity, which goes from a larger object to a smaller object, they're electrical discharge craters, and that's what they appear to be. In many cases, they appear to be electrical discharge craters. But I think it should be explored as something which may have occurred, because there are many stories from, shall we say, history, a long time ago, where you've got people observing from Earth thunderbolts. Well, that's what they appear to be, discharging from one planet to another. They pass close by. If Venus passed close to Earth a long time ago, it may well have discharged onto the moon. Now, some of them are certainly impact craters, and that one there looks rather like Copernicus crater.
Yeah, almost looks electric, doesn't it? You know what? I think an object coming into contact with another object when it's traveling through space, I think a lot of times they build up a charge, because we see that in satellites. They talk about it in all kinds of stuff like that. That when it gets close enough, there could be a gigantic electrical discharge between the two objects. One of the major points we should be making is the fact that if man has walked on the moon, if he's taken all kinds of equipment up there, if he's had all kinds of sensors there and rovers and, probes and everything else, how come they don't have an answer for how the craters were created? They're digging in the ground, they're doing everything up there, they're bringing back samples. That's what they claim they have done. So why don't they have the answers for these things? Why are they still experimenting, trying to figure it out? Why is there so many different theories on how the craters are created?
I think it's generally accepted that most of them are impact craters. There might be some volcanic craters here and there and stuff. We can see the craters ourselves with the telescopes. We're looking at telescope images, right, as a matter of fact. So,
but you physically, from a telescope, you can see the dust. You can see the effect of the amount of dust filling craters in. And if it levitates every month, if it's levitating a couple of kilometers in the air, it's working like a sieve. So the finest dust is going to travel the highest up. The heavier stuff is only going to come up a little bit. So when it comes back down, it's going to be graduated, just like you do in a sieve. So the lightest material will be on the top, the finest dust will be at the top, and then it gradually gets heavier all the way down.
Yeah, but we were looking at some of the documentation on this.
0.004 millimeters, yeah. The same as what I said the amount of dust is building up, the cosmic dust. I said it would be, in 100,000 years, it would be about 10 inches thick. So in 250,000 years, you would have 35 inches. And their calculations said it would be a meter, 39 inches.
Okay, so then let's look at it this way then. So if that's the case, and they are accurate, then the question remains, those retroreflectors that they supposedly left on the lunar surface, would those reflectors still reflect if they're full of dust? And how much dust would be inside of those things?
Well, given the fact that in 250,000 years there'd be 35 inches on every time the moon cycles, don't forget those are in columns that shoot back. There's no plate over the top of that. Those are little canisters in there, and then they're designed at the bottom. The mirrors are designed in little triangles, right? So that whatever strikes in it comes directly back in the path that it entered. That's how the laser's going to hit it and come back in the same direction that it came from. Those are down in little tubes kind of thing in there. Well, they're a James Bond moonraker. The little octagon or hexagon canisters, that's what they are. On the very first cycle of the moon, there's going to be enough dust to just finish them off. Quite seriously. When it's levitating that much dust. You're not waiting for cosmic dust that's taking thousands of years. You're literally picking dirt up 2 kilometers in the air and it's going to land back down on everything. You could have a couple inches of the stuff landing back down. You're not waiting for cosmic dust at that point. But if it's accumulating 1 meter every quarter of a million years, 250,000 years, the estimates are 39 inches, right? 1 meter.
Yeah, okay, now let's do that over 50 years.
Well, let's just take it over 3.8 billion years and see how much lunar dust is there.
Yeah, I remember reading that one of the reasons, I think it was the Chang'e 3 rover, one of the reasons it died so quickly was because of dust getting into the instruments and the motors and whatnot. The Chinese hadn't anticipated all the dust that was going to be getting into the vehicle, and so it ended up plonking dead, unable to awaken again, unable to move.
Well, I think there's a lot of spots on the moon, especially if you're going to some of the least active parts of the moon, like what the side that we see that's the least active. There could be hundreds of feet of very fine dust there. You simply wouldn't be able to land.
But again, look at this. Now we're back to this electrostatic lofting, how it can be lofted due to the sun striking it. It doesn't matter what you can ask ChatGPT-5, you can ask Google AI, both say the same thing. So this guy that says you can't have dust in a vacuum or dust can't propagate doesn't know what he's talking about.
Who was this bloke making that claim?
Just the guy that's commenting underneath our latest video.
Oh, and look at this. It says local deposition measured, that is, the Apollo detectors left on the lunar surface, would have 100 micrograms per centimeter squared per year, equals 1 gram per meter squared per year, equals 450 grams, that is, a basketball court of dust per year.
You'd have 1 pound of dust in what, 4,700 square feet. I measured the basketball court. You would accumulate 1 pound of dust, lunar dust, every year.
And now you have 50 pounds of dust that you're going to dump in the middle of that basketball court and spread.
That's just what's coming in cosmic dust. That has nothing to do with the fact that it levitates all the time and comes back down. That's a hell of a lot more dust. And then, well, we haven't seen any lunar impacts, so we can count those out.
No, but then it's going on. There's a millimeter every 1,000 years, and that's not including the rest of it. So the regolith accumulation as a layer is 1 millimeter every 1,000 years. But that's not including the levitation of the dust.
Right, and the fact of the matter is you put something down there, there's going to be dust on it every month. As soon as the sun comes off, anything that's levitating is going to fall back down again. And like it's going to look like a fresh snowfall. And I know, Jarrett, you don't know what a fresh snowfall looks like, but believe me, it's impressive.
Especially when it's several feet thick, which you get in Canada. I remember reading reports after the Apollo 11 alleged takeoff from the moon. They said that they put the retroreflector too close to the lander. So when it took off, the retroreflector got covered in dust from the takeoff. Because obviously when the ascent stage took off, it was blow dust everywhere. And they put it too close to the lander, so they couldn't use the Apollo 11 retroreflector because it was covered in dust, which is a bit sad. So I wonder which retroreflector the Mythbusters used when they showed how they could get a laser beam reflected back off one of them.
If that was Apollo 15 or they did on Mythbusters. I remember the first report of retroreflector signal from Apollo 11 was in sometime in 1969. I've seen some papers along those lines. So what is the explanation for it suddenly working again if it was covered in dust?
And they must have got up and cleaned it.
NASA's cosmic cleaning crew again.
Yep. Devon Island into action again. Or was it the polar bear that came along and had a swipe at it?
Oh, that was on Mars.
Oh, of course, yeah, I forgot about that.
Maybe we should have a black bear crushing the surveyor probe on the moon.
Or a grizzly bear. Somebody had upset his area.
Now we're going to get into the Barron report. And my favorite one is the workers are showing up highly intoxicated on the pad. And this deficiency list goes on and on and on. So we're going to let Jarrah take it from here. Jarrah, what do you think about this?
Well, first of all, let me just give some introduction to how this report came to be. Thomas Ronald Barron, he had compiled a list of all these various safety violations, shoddy workmanship, mismanagement, and general incompetence that was going on the launch site during the construction of the Apollo 1 capsule, not just Apollo 1, but various other Apollo spacecraft that the company North American Aviation was building. And he put together this list, which ended up being 55 pages long. Nothing seemed to be done about the problems that were ongoing. He leaked the report to the press. That got him fired. Then the Apollo 1 fire took place. He expanded the report into 500 pages. He presented it to Congress when they were having the investigations. One of the more interesting things that he said in his testimony is that one of his witnesses claimed that the astronauts had first noticed the fire and tried to get out for about 10 or 12 minutes. NASA officially says that only 15 seconds from the first mention of fire to when the capsule rupture went by. His witness, a fellow by the name of Al Holmberg, he later denied what he told Barron. About a week later, Barron was found dead at a railroad crossing with his wife and stepdaughter when their car got hit by a train. His 500-page report disappeared. Now, before I get to how this report came to be found, I want to mention as well, even though Holmberg denied what he told Barron, his testimony seems to be correlated with a statement by a RCA technician by the name of Gary W. Probst. He was watching the fires in the monitor at the time it happened. In his testimony, where is his testimony? Here, I got it. It's actually reprinted in this book here, Mission to the Moon by Kennan and Harvey. This is what Probst is telling him. He says, about 15 seconds after the cry of fire, I saw more arms in addition to Edward White's in front of the porthole, seeming coming from the left. Looking further back into the spacecraft, I could see the legs of the center astronaut moving about. The movement inside the spacecraft lasted about 2 minutes before the flames began to block the view. During the entire time, I watched the astronauts moving. Their spacesuits were silver in color, but no signs of being charred or burned. I know that my times are very near accurate because I remember saying to the others that had gathered in the area of the monitor, blow the hatch. Why don't they blow the hatch? He did not know at the time that the door could not be jettisoned explosively in emergency. One person that was near said that the spacesuits would protect them from the heat until they could get out. A short conversation then took place as to how long and how much the suits would protect them from the fire. Also, comment was made as to why no one had entered the White Room yet. During this time of the conversation, the White Room was still clear and the astronaut's motion was still visible. Now that's what he told the review board. Now, a year later, he was quoted in the Florida newspaper called Today, and he stood by what he said. He says, I think NASA convinced themselves of what happened in that spacecraft, but they didn't convince me. It was about 3 minutes after the fire started that the White Room began to fill with smoke. Prior to that time, the air was clear. I saw the astronauts moving inside for at least 2 minutes before the flames blocked the view. Now, as I mentioned before, Barron's 500-page report went missing. Bill Casey had tried to get a hold of the report for years, and as he was putting the finishing touches on the second edition of his book, expanded edition, he received a copy not only of Barron's report, but also the report of General Sam Phillips, who was the head of the Apollo program. He had written a similar report prior to Barron, which basically, when you cross-compare the two, he literally makes several complaints of the same issues that Barron had noticed was happening. And so, Casing, he received the copies of the Phillips and the Barron report from Senator Alan Cranston of California. This was in 1981. And Casing, he managed to reprint just under half of the report in his book. NASA, when they got their website up and running, they only published the first 6 pages of the Barron's report. Okay, and so for the longest time, that was all anyone had access to online. I've been looking and looking for years to try to find a copy. Casing himself went on to say that if anybody wanted a report, he would be happy to send him a copy for only the cost of the printing. Of course, Casing is no longer with us, and access to its papers, or access to his copy of the report, seems to have become rather elusive as well. I had visited Wendy Casing in California some years back. She gave me access to all of Bill's personal papers, all his research materials and stuff. I couldn't find his copy of the Barron report anywhere. Just by pure luck, somebody had posted the report, the 55-page report, to the Wayback Machine in PDF format. So I promptly downloaded that, uploaded it to my website, and I've been transcribing the report into a Word document because obviously the PDF copy, it's not the best quality it's very, very grainy. Some of the text is a little hard to read, but I painstakingly copied down every last word. I'm looking at the notes now. I think having transcribed every last word of this thing, I'm very intimately familiar all the problems that Barron noted. Some of the stuff I remembered from reading Casing's book years gone by. Others I'm seeing for the first time. As I said, I spent years trying to find this report, and it's just astonishing that all these problems are happening. As you mentioned, Robert, that people getting drunk on the job. And one thing that stood out in my mind as well is that there are many occasions of people smoking and generally showing a blatant disregard for things. One of them, there was a mention in this here where one of the technicians uses a lighter to try and read the text. You'd think, when they've got no smoking in this area posted all over the launch site, you'd think there'd be a better form of discipline for that. But anyways, the whole report, it reads as there have been several violations by North American aviation. He's not only critical of North American aviation, he's also critical of NASA for not being there more often and making sure this kind of stuff doesn't take place. But in particular, what I've noticed is that no one seems to know what they're doing there, because one day that they might be working one shift, the second shift to take over, they would have no clue what the others were doing. They would have no paperwork as to how they would finish the job or continue the job, and it'd be moved to a different location before they even know, hey, what were we doing before? Has that been finished? Finished?